Well, good evening and welcome to this Wednesday's Wednesday Watch Party. We're going to try to do these maybe on a more consistent basis in the fall with all the elders involved. But for this month, for the month of June, what we wanted to look at is what is the reason for the rainbow? It's June 1st, and undoubtedly, throughout Facebook and all over the place, we're starting to see rainbows everywhere. What's the reason behind the rainbow? What's the real reason, I should say? Not the reason that people have kind of made up or conjured up in their own minds to suit themselves. But what's the real reason behind the rainbow? What does it actually mean? What's the indication? What is it that's going on? And so what we're going to do throughout the next 5 weeks at Crossroads is we're going to do a very brief 10-15 minute tops look at the reason for the rainbow. And so it'll be myself, and then Pastor Searle is going to also come in, and he's going to talk about some of the science behind it. Is a worldwide flood even possible? Is it even reasonable to assume that the Bible's accurate in that all of the animals fit on an ark? Is that even possible? Or so he's going to look at some of the science behind this. Are these things even possible? Or is it just kind of things that are metaphors that we're supposed to take a different way, or is it literal that this actually happened? So Cyril's going to cover those. I'm going to look a lot at the socio-cultural things, the dynamics, the theology behind what's actually happening there. Where's the world at that time? And that's what we're going to look at today. What is the reason for the flood? Because that's where we get the rainbow. And so what's the reason for it? And so if we're going to look at Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 8, which read this way: "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and the birds of the heavens. For I am sorry that I have made them." But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And we'll stop there, because right in there we have the reason for the flood. We have enough. Now, whether or not you agree with that, that's up to you. But we have the reason here. And I'm going to see if we can make sense of why this result would be God wiping out the earth, essentially, with the flood. And so right in the very beginning of this section, we read, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." What that means is evil was reigning on the earth. It was for that reason that God looked at man and said, I'm done. I'm tired of it. I'm done. Now, here's a tricky piece. God is sovereign, right? That's what we know. Before the foundations of the world, God knew what was going to happen. So why does the Bible read this way? Is it all kind of metaphor, or is it legitimate that God looks at man and regrets making him? Does God actually feel these things? And so if we understand the cause is the intention of the hearts of the thoughts of the hearts of men is evil continually, did that catch God by surprise, or did God know it? God knew it, of course. We would look at that and understand the sovereignty of God is present. So what does that mean that God looked at this, that at that time in history, things had gotten to such an extent that God wiped out humanity? Well, men have progressively gotten worse. Things have gotten worse on the earth since the creation, when sin came in. And as we follow through the lines of man, things get more and more evil as things go on. It doesn't catch God by surprise. And let me see if I can frame it this way for an easier way for us to understand. When I was a kid, my parents used to videotape me wrestling and other athletic events. And if I were to go back and watch one of those now, or let me rephrase that. If my mom were to go back and watch one of those now, you can always hear my mom yelling in the background. If we were to watch one of those now, and in fact we have done this, she will sit and watch the video. She'll know the outcome of what's going to happen. She knows it, but it is almost as if she is in that moment again, and she's turning herself and she's yelling at the TV, and all of these things. But she already knows the outcome. She experiences the emotion as it unfolds, even though she knows what's going to happen. And that's just a way for us to kind of frame what is meant here in the word with this. But the result of this, where man has gone, and what God is going to do, is going to be the blotting out of everything. Now that could lead us to some problems or some thinking. First off, it might sound a little bit harsh And we might look at this and say, man, that seems like a bit of overkill. But what I would challenge you is this: should God stand by when evil happens? See, there are many people that think that God does stand by when and allows evil to happen, or doesn't do anything. God is too weak to do anything when evil happens. And yet, when you bring something like this up, many of those same people would say that's a terrible thing to do. God will tolerate evil for only so long, and then He will intervene. And I want to be careful how I say that, because I don't want to under imply or over imply certain things. But the bottom line is God will not tolerate evil for long. And that's why, as a Christian, if you engage in sinful behaviors, eventually your sin will find you out. And God will put an end to it. You're my child, therefore you will not conduct yourselves in this way. We look at the nation of Israel, and that's what we see throughout their history. We can look at our own lives and often see that same thing. And so when we look at this, God is not going to stand by and allow evil to continue. And so what does He do? He blots out the earth with a greater plan at work, which is where Noah comes in. But before we get to that part, we also look at this, and you might question and say, well, why would God do such a thing? Why would He wipe out man? That seems a bit extreme. And what I would look at that and retort with is, does not God, who made everything, who made man in His own image, God who sustains everything, does He not have authority over everything? I mean, this is the God that we serve. He has authority over all things. We tend to try to utilize His grace and mercy to thumb our nose at Him. But does He not own everything? Does He not command your heart to beat? Does He not command your lungs to fill with oxygen? Does He not sustain the trajectory of the earth around the sun? Does He not do all these things? Does He not tell the waves, tell the ocean, your waves can come only this far? This is the God we're talking about. This is who God is. And it does us well to look at this and recognize His authority. Because when we look at the flood, that's what we're looking at, is the authority of God, the sovereignty of God, the power of God, the magnificence of God, and the grace of God. And so when we look and we see that the hope that God instills in that is that the final statement that we read, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is an important statement, because there's one guy, one family that's going to be redeemed. And through them, all of humanity will ultimately be blessed through Christ. But God always has, in churchdom or Christendom, we often refer to, God always has this remnant of people. There's always a remnant that are serving God. I would challenge you to be a part of that remnant, be about serving God. But as we look to understand the dynamics of where does the rainbow come from, we look back at the beginning of what started the circumstances to get things to go in motion that would lead to this promise that God's going to have at the end of all of this. When we get 5 weeks into this, when we see the rainbow and what it actually means, man's depravity is what put it in motion. I find it interesting that culturally it is the depravity of man that has come to abscond with the meaning behind the rainbow. The rainbow is a promise that God will not flood the earth again, and we'll talk about that as we get there. But the same depravity, the sinfulness of man that led to the flood, is oftentimes what we embrace and attempt to steal and rob from God the glory that belongs to Him, by exalting ourselves in our own sins. So the challenge to you this week is to recognize and see and submit ourselves unto this holy God, because He's the one that owns all of it. He has the ultimate authority, and it is by His grace that we stand, by His grace that we live. And you have only so long that God will tolerate evil. At some day, each of us will pay a price. The wages of sin is death. We will physically die, and at that point we enter into eternity. But God, similar to Noah, has established a way in order for us to jump on the ark of Jesus Christ, in order that we can be redeemed through God's sacrificial love for us. So when we look at this and we see ourselves in this story, we see the wickedness of our own hearts. We see the depravity of who we are. that should draw us back to the heart of who God is and the love and the grace and the mercy that He has provided us a way out. He has provided us an ark, if you will, through His Son, through Jesus Christ, who paid a debt for us. So next week, Pastor Searle is going to pick up from this point, and he's going to talk about, is it even possible for there to be a worldwide flood? Hopefully you enjoyed this, and hope you come back and join us next week. And if you're able to, join us at church on Sunday. If not, then at least join us at church via all the live streams and everything else. That God bless.